But without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Miss Jennifer.
Thank you all for coming tonight. Certainly a pleasure for me to be here. Thanks to our host, too, at Song and Story. Don't you love this little place?
Yes.
It's adorable. And thank you especially to our friends, my friends at Wallace Pearson. I believe you probably all book your travel through them. And if you don't, you should. And I'll tell you why. Because they have preferred partners. They don't sell just anybody. And whenever a partner like me is in the area, I live in South Florida, we make appointments, they sit down, they take time out of their day, they take notes, they learn about what's new cabins, new itineraries, new destinations, all kinds of different things. Then they go on special training every year. They do this thing called Travel Week in Las Vegas in August, and that's really a lot of fun. 120 degrees and, and no sleep. And really, they're educated, they're professional, and then sometimes they have that difficult task of going out and experiencing the products that they have to sell. So they really do know their products firsthand. If you walk in and tell them where you'd like to go, then they can really fit the right product to match your travel expectations. And they do a great job selling us. And they're all nice people. So, before I start, Angela asked how many of you have traveled with us. How many more than once? Okay, how many more than 3 times? Wow, how many times?
1, 2, 3, 5, and we have 3 books.
3 books, wow. Did you have a favorite?
Oh, probably the first one we did, which was Classic Italy.
And sir, how many?
5. We got 1 book.
All right, and did you have a favorite?
I think we both enjoyed Italy.
Italy, you
Yeah.
too. All right. Sir, how many times?
4.
4. What did you like about your trips?
I'm looking forward to Antarctica.
Antarctica. Wow. Okay, that's a biggie. You have traveled with us many times.
Yeah, we've had 3 and got 4 books.
4 books. Wow.
Switzerland is the best.
No wonder why we don't have any inventory left. Switzerland was the best. And I know where are they? Oh, you've traveled many times.
Yeah.
Mostly on river cruises, right?
Well, not all with Tauck river cruises. Most of by land have been. And our first one was the Classic Italy too, and that just sold us. They were just so great.
Did you have a
got
good?
our 8th book.
Your 8th. Did you have a good time on the river cruise?
I did.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody else? All right. So I don't need to do my presentation. You haven't been with us. You heard from them. No, I'll tell you. Well, I'm going to show you a video on the history of Tauck with our partner Ken Burns.
All I want is a congenial party. 10 minutes after leaving Newark, we shall be just one happy party. Properly chaperoned, out for a real good time. I want no grouches or pessimists. Arthur C. Tauck.
In the summer of 1925, the son of an immigrant, 27-year-old Arthur C. Tauck, loaded a handful of passengers into a Studebaker for a carefully planned 1,000-mile vacation through New York and New England. It marked in many ways the fulfillment of his father's quest for the American dream. It also signified the beginning, not just of an enduring family company, but also of a new industry, which has enabled countless travelers to experience the natural wonders and fascinating cultures of the world in ways they could never do on their own. This is a family story, spanning 3 generations of innovation and a tireless pursuit of excellence. It can be traced back to that sunny July day on the dusty roads of New England.
My dad was a guy who really was uneducated. He went to the 7th grade. He was 14 years old, and he had to go to work, so he became a bank messenger in New York City. One night, while they were lowering a cigar box filled with rolled coin down through a dumbwaiter shaft, they kind of handed it down rather than run the dumbwaiter to the vaults below. The end of the cigar box broke, and 3,000 dimes scattered in the grease at the bottom of the shaft. And my father got fired for doing that. The bank manager told him, when you find a better way to handle coin, you get your job back. So you've seen them. You can go into a supermarket or a bank and they have these aluminum coin boxes. That was his invention. So he brought them back, got his job back. He found that he could sneak out at lunch hour, and he could sell those boxes to neighboring banks, and he was making more money selling those boxes at lunch hour than he was as a teller. So he quit his job. He now had independence, and he went on the road as a salesman.
Arthur Tauck reveled in life on the road, meeting new people and discovering hidden gems along the routes he traveled throughout New York and New England. One day, on a selling trip in 1924, Arthur was having lunch at the Wigwam restaurant at the top of the Mohawk Trail in the Berkshires of western Massachusetts. He noticed that most of the other patrons were business travelers like himself. He wondered why so few people made this trip simply to enjoy the magnificent scenery. One thought led to another. Would vacationers be willing to travel with a knowledgeable guide, he wondered? He then hit on a revolutionary idea. What if he arranged his own tour and charged customers one price that covered all expenses, not just transportation, but a knowledgeable guide, meals, boarding houses, museum fees, even bellhop tips? He started to sketch out his first itinerary.
And so he advertised in the Newark Evening News for people to take his next selling trip. And he got 6 people to take his next selling trip. And he had a good time. And he did it as a lark. He was a kid. But he got so many letters from the friends of those people that he ran 3 such trips the next year. And then he got so many letters, he bought a bus, and that was really the beginning.
Arthur had no intention of foregoing his coin tray business. But the referrals from his happy guests created significant demand for more motor tours. And Arthur soon realized that he could guide these travelers full-time. Arthur acquired a small fleet of buses and developed several tours beyond New York and New England, including Virginia, Nova Scotia, and Pennsylvania's Pocono Mountains. 10 years after Arthur's first tour, Tauck Tours was given the first tour broker license, and the guided travel industry was born. Survival was not always easy for Tauck, and the ability to adapt and find a way to evolve is an important part of the Tauck story. The Great Depression and the new airline industry threatened Tauck's existence. During World War II, the US government forced Tauck to shut down for 5 years as part of the war effort. It was only after the urging of his loyal following that a reluctant Arthur reopened the business after the war.
I think the thing that I learned most from him was you have to do things right. You don't put up with anything that's second best. He was so far in that direction that we didn't like to go to Sunday dinner with him at a restaurant, because if the crackers weren't warmed, he would scream at the waiter and it would be embarrassing for us.
His son, Arthur Jr., joined the family business full-time in 1956 and made his mark very quickly by being the first to charter an aircraft for leisure travel. In 1958, he became Tauck's president.
Good morning, Tauck Tours. Donna speaking.
Arthur Jr. expanded his father's vision and grew Tauck to a travel brand respected the world over. New destinations and new ways to experience them, including helicopters and trains, multiplied throughout North America and Hawaii. In 1991, he developed innovative itineraries throughout Europe.
Arthur Tauck never settles, and he has a real singular focus on the guest experience. We have a saying internally that you can go to a restaurant and if the steak's not cooked properly, give it back, or if you order a shirt's not fitted right, you can have it resized or whatever. But with travel, you can't return it. It only happens once. And so we all now share that same philosophy in how we operate the business today.
As demand for international travel grew, Arthur Jr. passed the torch to the 3rd generation of Taucks. Tauck's offerings soon expanded across all 7 continents, from Alaska to Antarctica, Africa to Asia. New trips were developed not just based on where Tauck traveled, but how one traveled. River cruising in Europe was first introduced by Tauck in 1993, long before that craze took hold. Small ship cruising was developed to explore destinations best experienced by water.
Wow.
Tauck Bridges represented the first guided adventures designed specifically for families. More recently, Tauck has developed events and unique partnerships that offered exclusive, once-in-a-lifetime experiences.
People want authentic experiences. They want to be more immersed in the cultures when they travel. And so those trends bode well, I think, for Tauck very much. People say the world's been discovered. How are we going to keep discovering the world? And I don't believe that at all. I think there'll always be new ways to experience the world. So the future, I think, is very bright for Tauck and for our customers.
Arthur Tauck Sr. would still recognize in every Tauck trip today his simple, brilliant formula, what he called the ideal vacation, that is still the heart of every journey Tauck develops and guides to this day. He would also recognize something of himself, a restless desire to keep moving forward, to constantly make things better and better still. This pursuit of excellence and pioneering spirit have enabled Tauck to seek and find new ways to see the world that are just as fresh today as Arthur Tauck's first tour on those roads of New England.
When you take a Tauck trip, no matter what kind of trip that you take with us, there's always a tour director. That's somebody that's trained and knowledgeable about every itinerary that they do. I was actually one for about a decade, so I did a lot of different itineraries. But I did 2 training tours on every one. That meant I shadowed somebody who had been running that trip for a long time, and I learned about the culture, about the history, and about the little things. Like one trip that I used to do quite frequently was our Week in France program. It would start in Nice and it would finish in Paris, and as soon as I'd be done in Paris, I'd get on a plane and fly back to Nice. It would be about the same time that the Delta 82 was arriving, and we'd do it again. I'd do it again and again and again. So I usually did about 6 trips in a row. So I felt like I knew the people in the restaurants and the people in the hotels. If my guests had any questions or concerns, it was easy for me to get those because they knew I was going to come back, you know, and those were my friends. I went out to dinner with those people, and they made it nice and easy. So it was a lot of things. I felt like, you know, I knew where to buy tickets, where the motor coach should park, where every bathroom between Nice and Paris was, and it made it a very nice experience for my guests. I never sold anything to a Tauck guest. We include all the sightseeing. So when you look at a brochure of another tour operator, they might say the same things, but it's not always comparing apples to apples. For example, I have a friend, Denise. She works for another tour operator. She's called the tour manager, and her company might include the city tour of the Vatican, the city tour of Rome, but does not include the trip inside the Vatican. Denise will do a trip of Italy, then she'll do a trip of Ireland, then she'll do a trip of Hawaii, then she'll go back to Ireland. Nothing consistent, you know, and a lot of times she goes to hotels she's never been to. She's going to cities she's never been to. She can't tell you where the ATM is that was broken on the last trip, and not to use that, you know, and there's one around the corner that's not going to eat your card. But Tauck Director has that kind of knowledge because we do that again and again and again. And another thing, Denise's company dictates to her every single day where you want to go shopping. They know where you want to go shopping every day. They take you shopping. Yeah, we don't do that. You have free time if you like to go shopping. We're not going to hold you hostage inside a store, and the tour director with us would get fired if they took a kickback. So it's not something that you're going to have to worry about with us. Our hotels are always chosen for their location and their ambiance. And sometimes, believe me, they're a destination unto themselves. We stay at the Daniele right on the Grand Canal in Venice, the Fairmont Monte Carlo. Fairmont, we stay at Fairmonts throughout the globe. Is everybody familiar with the Fairmont brand? Mm-hmm. Fairmont, we are the largest partner of Fairmont, and they have an acronym, TCF. Tauck comes first. They treat us really well because we're systematic. They know what to expect with us. The tour directors are very organized, and it's nice and easy. And the Belmont up on top of Machu Picchu, that really changes the experience to stay at the top of Machu Picchu. On our Peru and Galapagos itinerary, we stay up there. So while the tourists are going down in the train, we have the site to ourselves. And the next day, if you choose to get up early to see the sunrise, again, the site's just ours. It feels very intimate, very private, and you feel very privileged to get to do that. We take the logistics out of the equation so you can be free to be in the moment and enjoy where you are. Things like transfers. You don't have to worry about that. No matter how you book your flights, if you have frequent flyer points, use those. Just let us know your schedule. We'll pick you up at the airport, private transfer, take you back to the airport. You might choose to stay a couple days longer or go in a couple days earlier. It's all easy. Little things like luggage. You don't have to worry about that. It'll be in your room, it'll be in your next room, it'll be in your next room. Once you get to meet the tour director, you don't have to touch your bags. Nice and easy. And then little things like if you bring a laptop or a tablet with you, we don't charge, the hotel's not going to charge you the internet access charges. We take care of those. So all those little things. Is there anybody here that likes to eat? Okay. So we think, we want you to have a nice experience when it comes to the local cuisine, and we want you to feel, you've really been immersed in it. So lots of different cultural meals, but we want you to have lots of choices, flexibility. So dinner time, you choose when you might like to have dinner, who you might like to sit with, if you'd like to join others or not, and what you'd like to eat. Most of the time you get the entire menu, you can choose whatever you'd like to. One trip that I ran really quite frequently was our Cape Cod trip. And on that trip we include dinner 6 nights out of the 7. What do you think people are ordering?
Wow.
Lobster. Yep. Sometimes chowder too. So you have lots of choices. And then it's all about the little things. It's about the details. It's about, our tour architects focus on showing you the destination the best way that we can find. So here's some examples. This is top left is a picture that I took on the Lee River on our China trip. We have a private boat, so you're not waiting for lots of people to get on, hunting for a seat, lots of people to get off. We have the run of the boat, and it's nice and easy, and it's a beautiful trip. It's something you won't remember. Over to the right, there are many palaces in Europe that we go to. Some are open to the public during the afternoon, but in the evenings, they're closed. We bring in caterers and performers, just us inside, and it's a really nice experience. The bottom left is a picture that I took on our Tanzania trip. So instead of having a welcome party at a hotel, in a conference room, they've chosen this pavilion where you're looking out into dormant volcanoes. You'll see elephants off in the distance, acacia trees. Yeah, if you look out of your eye, you might see a man with a rifle doing this. Don't pay attention to him, and really it's the sunset time, it's a magnificent experience. And then if you come with us up to New England on our Hidden Gems of New England itinerary, we're going to take you to Walpole, New Hampshire. I know it's not on your bucket list probably, but it's where Florentine Studios is. It's Ken Burns' private studios. It's not open to the public, and if Ken is there, you get to meet him. I got to meet him twice already, and he's an amazing guy. We also have some events where he's the keynote speaker, and you get to meet him on those. So if you're interested in that, I can tell you more. So it's, again, little things like if you come with us to Australia, New Zealand, we have our own privately chartered all business class seat flights. That means getting to the plane, getting on it, being seated in a nice luxurious seat, being handed a flute of champagne, sipping it, enjoying it. When you get to your destination, you get to the hotel, your bags are in your rooms, none of that taking your shoes off, getting to the airport a couple hours early. None of that stuff. That airport experience isn't quite the nice experience these days, so it is really nice to be able to do that. We have float planes up in the Canadian Rockies. We're going to fly you over to Bouchard Gardens for the day, for the afternoon, for lunch, and then come back. If you come with us to Africa, we don't crowd the safari jeeps. Those seats are bench seats in Tanzania. They can hold 3 people. We would never put one of you in the middle seat. Why would you be stuck in the middle? It's like getting the short straw. You can't look outside, see that amazing destination, which it truly is. Over to the right, we have, in the Canadian Rockies, we have an itinerary where we have a private dome car, where we have a rail ride. We also do in Switzerland on the Glacier Express. So a private dome car, which is nice and easy. We include the hot air balloon ride on the African trip, where other companies charge up to $500 a person for it, but we feel it's a necessary component. Everybody should do it. It's sunrise, it's magical. You get to see the animals, you have no idea you're even looking at them, and then you have a champagne brunch out in the bush. And then over to the right, the experts that we have around the globe are people that we really have sought out. So this is Celia Sand. She's the granddaughter of Winston Churchill. And she's going to tell you great stories about her grandfather if you're in London with us. And then she might tell you some things that you won't read about too in the books, like the juicy stuff. Like one night she was on the Christina, which was Onassis's private yacht, and she saw that Aristotle was in the cabin with Jackie, and she was up late, and she saw him sneak over to Maria Callas's cabin in the middle of the night. Yeah. Yeah. Ooh. Probably won't read that anymore else, right? Carolyn Robb is another one that we have in London, and she's going to do a little cooking demonstration, but mostly she's going to talk to you about the family that she used to work for. She used to work for Princess Di, Prince Charles, and those two young boys. So she was a private chef to the royal family. Up in the Baltic, we have a man who was a former member of Gorbachev's parliament. So he's going to talk to you about the KGB, about Gorbachev, about the Russian government, about so many things that, you know, we feel like we think we have an idea about, and when we hear him, we're going to feel like we know nothing about it. You know, and it really is, a Tauck trip is really an education, and that's why we have these experts around the globe. So you saw in the video that we're a family-run company on the 3rd generation of the Tauck family, and for those of you that aren't that familiar with us, it's because we don't advertise. It's very rare that you'll see a Tauck ad. We know that all those other cruise lines, all those other companies that are spending money, you know, they're spending millions advertising all the time. We know where that money comes from. Where does it come from? The tour price, the cruise price, exactly. So we feel if we put more into the experience, then you'll go and you'll come back and you'll say, wow, and you'll want to come back again and again and again. So for those of you that haven't traveled, but you saw those people that have traveled many times, or you may have heard of us through friends or relatives or people that have taken us, because that's really our business model. I imagine those of you that have traveled many times have told friends or relatives or people that have traveled with us, and that's how you learned about us, and that's really what we do. So we have 6 different ways to travel, and I'll touch on each one of these. Our World Discovery product line incorporates our land program, so that would be North America, Europe, and our exotic itineraries. We have great itineraries out in the national parks, and we partner with Ken Burns. You might not know what the relationship is that we have, but about 7 years ago, we approached Ken Burns to see if he wanted to work with us. And he said, no, you know, everything I do is on PBS. I'm a nonprofit, you know, I don't work for any commercial partnerships. And then he did a little investigating research, found out about Tauck, took a Tauck trip, and he realized, he met the Tauck family, he said, wow, he said, you guys do exactly what I do. You do it through travel, I do it in film. He said it's a very symbiotic relationship. He said, yes, I'll work with you. So he's a contributor. What does he do? He helps design certain itineraries, things that he's very familiar with, things that he's studied and researched, like the national parks. When he and his partner Dayton Duncan put together that national park video, it's a 6-part series. If you're familiar with it, America's Best Idea was the title. It took 10 years. So they were in the parks, different weather, different lighting, you know, they knew the best time of day to go and see the arches, to go at sunrise when nobody else is there and see the golden sun come up and the colors on the rocks change and change and change, and feel, you know, so special to have been able to do that without, you know, anybody telling you to. Or to stay on the Grand Canyon on the North Rim. Does anybody know why we might stay on the North Rim?
It's crowded.
Exactly. Less crowded. On our Spirit of the Desert itinerary, we spend 2 nights right here on the North Rim. Only about 10% of the visitors that go to the Grand Canyon go to the North Rim. You have just the same amount of beauty right there, but you don't have all those walls of people right there in front of you. And he said, you know, the best way to see Capitol Reef National Park, you can't imagine how beautiful it is unless you fly over it. And he said the Grand Canyon too, you can't imagine how massive it is unless you fly over it. So we charter small planes and we fly over it. So there's certain itineraries that he really has choreographed. He's introduced us to different people, different routing, all kinds of things. And then we have certain events that are they're like some of his documentaries. Like next year we'll have an event called Jazz in New Orleans, and that will be a takeoff of his documentary on jazz. And it's private concerts every day, and it's really a great thing to do if you're into music, and he's the keynote speaker on that. We have itineraries all over North America. We have in New Mexico, we have in Michigan. People talk about staying at the Grand Hotel on Mackinac Island. You know, we have lots of New England itineraries, Canada, East and West, the Canadian Rockies, Eastern Canada. Lots of different Californian itineraries, so many trips I can't possibly name them all. We go to Alaska, and we also go to Hawaii. We feel that Hawaii is a place where, you know, there's a lot of spirituality, there's a different kind of culture than the lower 48. You might want to spend more time on each island that we go to. I think a lot of people choose to do this by cruise. And actually I worked on cruise ships, a cruise ship that used to circle the islands, and you'd spend, you know, a day in each port. But here you have more time. We spend about 3 nights on each island, and we have the hotels right on the sea, you know, beautiful hotels. You're eating the local cuisine, so it's a more immersive experience. And again, when we fly you from island to island, you don't have to worry about your luggage. You don't have to think of the little things. We take care of all the details and make it nice and easy for you. You saw perhaps on the video when we started to go to Europe in the 1990s, and it says the yellow roads of Europe. When Arthur Tauck, he was always asked, you know, why don't you go to Europe before the 1990s? And he used to go over and ride his bike, and he would look at what the other European tour operators did, and he said, I just can't do that. And he said they're missing out on the little things because they're going from city to city via the highway. They're not going on the back roads, they're not doing any of that. So he flew over with a couple guys from our operations department. They pulled out a big Michelin map, and he said, look, we're gonna go on those squiggly little yellow roads wherever possible. So we're gonna see them picking the grapes off the vines in Provence. We're gonna see the ladies putting the clothes out to dry in southern Italy, and we get to the feel for the authentic place of where we are. It takes about 2 years for all the research and development for an itinerary to get put in the brochure for us to say, yep, we're ready to go. So a couple years ago, we started to sketch out a Amalfi Coast trip, a land program. It's called Rome, Capri, and the Amalfi Coast. The product managers thought we'd go over to the island of Capri, would spend maybe half, 3/4 of a day there, would spend more time in Rome and more time in Amalfi. And then they went and they did the research, and they realized the whole island of Capri changes around 4 o'clock every afternoon. Why? Because all the tourists go home. The tourists go back, yes, because there's not a lot of big hotels, great hotels, you know, and what's there is very expensive. And we are lucky. We've got great partnerships around the globe, and we were able to get space in the best hotel, the Quintessana, on the island of Capri. All of our guests love it. And, you know, so now we spend 2 nights on the island of Capri. Now you can go out, go to the piazza, have Bellini, you know, join the beautiful people and see how the locals really live, instead of just seeing the tourists on the island and you being one of them. Now, they came up with a dilemma though. They of course wanted to do a tour, an island tour of Capri, and they didn't know how they were going to do that. The only thing they were offered were these enclosed vans that weren't really that nice. They said, oh, it's just not what we had imagined. So they did some more research, you know, talked to some more people, concierge, taxi drivers, all kinds of things. Then they met Roberto. Anybody got an idea what Roberto had? A convertible, yes. Did you do that trip? Did you do that trip?
I don't know, remember what it was called now, but we did a convertible.
Yeah, you probably did us. You must have done us. Yeah, so, and he's got a friend, Stefano, who has a convertible, and Gianfranco, who has a convertible. So we have a fleet of convertibles. That's how we take you around the island of Capri, you know, in style, like you should. And then we like to take you to maximize your time, so you're not waiting in line all the time. We're seeking out that way to show you the destination. So this is the Vatican, the Sistine Chapel, and my friend Annette took these pictures last summer when she took her daughter on one of our family itineraries. She went in at 6:30 with the Tauck group after it was closed. There was nobody else in there but the Tauck group. So It's nice to be able to do that. You're avoiding the crowds, and you actually get inside and you can take your camera inside. It's not like that during the day. You know, it's very crowded. Your guide's out here telling you what you should be looking at before you go in. You go inside and you're trying to remember all those things, and it's very crowded, and you can't take your camera in. So we'd like to do that wherever possible. We have a lot of opportunities to do that. So if you come with us to the Hermitage in St. Petersburg, we're going to take you in before it opens. If you come with us to the National Archives in Washington, D.C., again, we get in before it opens. You get to see the original Bill of Rights, Constitution. You're not shushed along because everybody's waiting to get in behind you. If you come with us to the Tower of London, we can get in before it opens. On some of our river cruises, we go to the Louvre after hours. You get to stand there in front of the Mona Lisa for as long as you'd like to, instead of being pushed out of the way. Versailles before it opens. When I used to take my guests to Cape Cod, we would get to the breakers right before it opened. We'd be the first ones in. There'd be nobody else in front of us. We'd have 2 local guides, or 2 docents, so it'd be nice and easy, and our guests wouldn't have to worry about waiting in line, being crowded, being in the back of a crowd, not seeing as much as they'd like to. Our exotic itineraries go from Asia, Africa, Latin America, South America, Australia, New Zealand. We have several new itineraries for next year. We have 3 new African itineraries. 1 will follow the migration. 2 will do Rwanda. Does anybody know what Rwanda's for? Gorilla trekking, yes. Yes, I'm excited about that. We'll have a Singapore and Bali itinerary, Kingdoms and Dragons. We'll have a new India and Bhutan itinerary, and a new China itinerary as well. How many of you have been on safari? How many of you that have been on safari think Africa is the best place on the planet? Yeah, I don't think you can go to Africa without falling in love with Africa. And I think a lot of people need a push to go to Africa. I absolutely did. I never felt the need to go to Africa. I'd been to the zoo. Why did I need to go to Africa? Really, that's how I thought. But about a decade ago, the zoo in Naples, down the road a bit, asked me to do a presentation, and 150 people RSVP'd for that presentation on Africa, and I'd never been. And so I thought, okay, yeah, I had lots of people that called in that were very knowledgeable about Africa, but one woman had the audacity to say that she had just stayed at Jack Hanna's house in Rwanda. And I thought, uh-oh. So I got one of the tour directors that runs our African programs to come in and do the portion on Africa. I talked about Tauck, and then I realized I needed to go for my own education so I could talk about it better. I wasn't excited to go. For me, it was just like something I needed to do. Well, I fell in love with it. You can't help but not fall in love with it, I think, because it is so beautiful. Every time you turn around, you see something more exotic than the last time. You have these incredible sunsets. You have stars that you feel like you can pluck them out of the sky. You have acacia trees and baobab trees, and you have termite mounds that look like pieces of pottery. I mean, every time you're looking at something that's so different. You have dormant volcanoes, you have Mount Kilimanjaro, which is snow-capped. You have so much physical beauty, and then you have these animals that are in their natural state. They have no clue, and they're not afraid, and they're just so magical. And you don't have a schedule. You can keep on going, or you can stop and watch them. It doesn't matter. It's not like you have to be at the museum at 2 o'clock. No, you can stop for as long as you'd like to and take as many pictures as you'd like to. We have great trips. We have several itineraries, and they're just as good, if not better, than those 5-star safari companies. And the people, you will fall in love with the people too. They're just something that when you come home from Africa, it's something that will play over and over and over in your mind. So I went once a couple years ago right after that presentation, and then I had to go again, and I'm sure I'll go again. It's one of those things, it grabs you. The people are amazing. These people have no belongings. You go into a Maasai hut, and they've got just a cot to lay on, and they have the porridge cooking. No matter what time of day, the porridge is cooking. Why? Because that's what they eat for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. That's what they eat. That's their diet. You go to a school and you meet these kids, and these kids are so happy to learn. Sometimes they walk 2 hours each way to get there. And the school is a cinder block building. It might have a window or two, but it doesn't have running water, it doesn't have a cafeteria, it doesn't have a bathroom, you know? And these kids, they're so happy, and they're sitting 3 or 4 kids to a desk, and they're learning. You take a picture of them, and then you show them the camera, and they're trying to figure out which one is themselves, because they've never seen a mirror, you know? And they're so happy, and they're smiling, and that's the big takeaway. They have nothing, and they're happy, and they're always happy. You know, you come back here and you think, wow, you know, what do we have? We have so much, they have so little, and they're happy. And some people call this glamping. Yes, it's not Boy Scouts, but we stay in the best hotels. We stay at the Four Seasons Serengeti, the Fairmont Mount Kenya Safari Club. This is the Belmont on Eagle Island. These are pictures that I took last May. So this is our camp, our private one. That bathtub would have held probably 5 people. It was huge, but we had an indoor shower and an outdoor shower, so who needed the bathtub? Our own private plunge pool. One day I was sitting on one of those chairs and I was watching the elephants swim, and I mean, not in the plunge pool, but in the swamp just beyond the plunge pool, and a monkey came over. He was about to jump into the pool. I went to get my camera and I scared him away. And this is in the Serengeti. This is often voted the best tented camp in Africa. It's called Kirawara. It has a very British colonial feel. You walk in, you've got oriental carpets. You go into the bathroom, it looks just like a bathroom at home, except for when you flush the toilet, the water goes in the opposite direction. And then you walk in, you have hardwood floors, you have a nice hard ceiling. And does anybody know why you stay in the tent? Because you're hearing the animals all night. You're hearing the lions calling each other from one side of the park to the other side. Sometimes we have camps along the water. You're hearing the hippos, you're hearing the hyenas. You know, don't look afraid. You have that zipper that's going to protect you. So the day we were in the Ngorongoro crater, beautiful. It's like heaven on earth. There's pink flamingos. You're going to see cheetahs. You're going to see wildebeest and impalas and zebra and giraffe, and I mean so many animals. Ostrich, all kinds of animals, birds, and we passed all these other safari companies. They're sitting at a picnic table having their box lunch, and we came upon this spread where we had our own private chef right here cooking a barbecue for us. Yeah, we had linen and china. We even had our own porta potty too. That's a treat, you know, for the ladies, because the guys can go back and check the tires every now and then. It's easier for them than it is for us. These are 2 of our guests. This is the infinity pool right here. This is the Four Seasons Serengeti. So these are 2 of our guests. This is a watering hole, and these are elephants. Yeah. You get spoiled, you really do. So I mentioned that we do have events this year. We have one in Washington, D.C., and it's based on a couple of Ken Burns' documentaries, so he's the keynote speaker. We have early entrance to the National Archives. We have an evening in the News Museum after it's closed. We have Ken Burns' keynote, and Harold Holzer, who's a phenomenal historian on Lincoln. He's written more than 40 books on Lincoln, and he ties Lincoln into every president for the last 50 years to make it really engaging. And you have lunch at the Senate Cafe. You have a member of a Supreme Court clerk that comes and talks to you, so it's really engaging if you want to learn more about our government. And then there are some ways we feel that they're easier to access by water. So we have a couple different ways to travel. We have river cruises and we have small ship cruises. How many of you have been on a river cruise? Great way to travel, right? How many of you have been on a small boat, say under 300 guests? That's a nice way to travel too. I think you get spoiled once you go on a small boat, and it's hard to go back to the big boats if you like learning about a destination. So we have a lot of different partners. We partner with Windstar on several different itineraries, Silver Sea in the Galapagos, Ponant. If you're not familiar with the company Ponant, it's a French company. They have a sailing ship that's 60 passengers. Then we have 4 250 passenger vessels, and they're building 6 184 passenger vessels. And we use a lot of those vessels. And then we use the Metropolitan, we use this adventure cruise in the Galapagos as well. So this vessel here is called Le Ponant. It's a 60-passenger sailing vessel that I was mentioning. And I was one of the 2 Tauck directors on board when I was a Tauck director. So we do a couple different itineraries, but we do one where we stay overnight in Malta, we do a tour of the island, then we get on the boat, and we sail. And sailing out of Malta, Valletta is the capital of Malta, it's a walled city. And as you're sailing out, you're listening to 1492 by Vangelis. It's very special as the sails are going up. And you feel, wow, this isn't like a cruise that I've been on. It feels very special and very intimate. The first stop that we make is in Taormina, Sicily. It's on the northeastern coast of Sicily. And instead of being an hour and a half away in the port of Catania, we're right there in Giardini, Naxos. We just have to take a little van to the top. We do the tour of the Greco-Roman theater. We've got plenty of free time. When we come back, we can jump off the back of the boat, go for a swim. They've got noodles, they've got water skis, they've got all this stuff if you'd like to get wet, and it's really neat. Then we go through the Straits of Messina that night. We land in the Aeolian Islands. So this picture here is a picture of Lipari. It's one of the 7 Aeolian Islands. And I took it one day. I said to myself, oh, I hope they're, you know, I saw one of those big cruise ships going by, kind of the rock climbing wall and the ice skating rink, and I thought, oh, please don't let them come here. And it kept going. Does anybody know why?
Tourists.
Get in there.
I think it has a little bit to do. I think that if the Italians were industrious, they could, you know, find a way to get the big ships in there. I was in the port of Monte Carlo the day that they brought that big, long dock in there from the south of Spain. But I realized there's only a couple buses on the island, there's one road. If there were 1,000 people, or 2 or 3, or 6,000 people getting off, what would they sell them? What would they do with them? There's nothing they could. So we have it to ourselves. And then that afternoon, the captain will put the sails up, and he'll drop some zodiacs, and we'll go around the ship, and we'll take pictures. So I took this picture in front of the island of Stromboli, with the steam coming out of it. Yeah, so that was pretty neat. Then we jump off the back of the ship, go for another swim. That night we have dinner outside and we watch the island. Stromboli is one of the most active volcanoes in the Mediterranean, and usually once about every 15 minutes you see it poof, red fire into the sky. It's known as the beacon to the sailors because of that, and it's pretty amazing. We go up to the top deck, we have limoncello, and we just watch the fireworks, and it's pretty special. We go into the town of Amalfi the next day. We get in around 8:30 in the morning when the baker's just putting his freshly baked goods in the windows. You know, there's no crowds, there's nobody else there. By the time the big cruise ships come around 10:30, that's our cue to leave and go up to Ravello and have an amazing lunch overlooking the Amalfi Coast. The trip is amazing. There's lots of ports. We go into the port of Bonifacio. Big ships can't get in here. It's the southernmost tip of Corsica. And it's a very narrow fjord, and it's just an amazing, amazing place to be. So why would anybody take a small ship with us? Because you have the guides who are going to teach you about where you are. All the excursions are Tauck excursions. You might have choices of 2 a day. One might be active, one might be more cultural, but they're all included, as well as all the gratuities. Your port charges, your taxes, and your beverages, all included. You go to see anybody here at Wallace Pearson, you take the Band-Aid off quickly, give them your credit card, you're done. So we have a lot of itineraries, and next year we'll have a few more itineraries. Where Ponant will debut this vessel, the first 184 passenger vessel this summer, Le La Perouse, up in Iceland. And each one of these vessels, they're building this blue eye in the hull. They're building a huge porthole so you can actually see outside. And they're putting quadrophones into the hull so you can also hear what's going on outside. And then for next year, we have several different new itineraries. Great Lakes with 2 nights in Chicago, 2 nights in Toronto, before and after. You can choose to stay either in the Four Seasons or the Fairmont in each of those cities. The Scottish Isles, Edinburgh to Glasgow. Does everybody know where Spitsbergen is? It's round trip from Oslo. It's known for the wildlife, the reindeer, the walrus, the polar bear. And round trip from Juneau will be the Inside Passage, and then cruising down under, we have a 9-day land and a 9-night cruise on one of those 184 passenger vessels. In Antarctica, this is why you go to Antarctica on a small ship, because you'll get off of the vessel. We do an average of 2 Zodiac landings a day. If the weather's decent, that's what we do. If you go on a big ship, you're kind of doing a drive-by, because they curtail how many people can actually go ashore at any one time. So our vessels carry no more than 196 guests, because 98 is the maximum number. So half the guests will listen to the lecture, the other half will be ashore, and then we switch, and it's pretty amazing. We feel that river cruising is kind of a combination between taking a land tour and taking a cruise. You are immersed in the destination because you're in port every single day. And we have lots of meals ashore, so you get the local cuisine as well. We also usually build on land before and after. Say, our Prague to Budapest, 2 nights in Prague and 2 nights in Budapest, before and after the trip. And with us, again, everything's included. Before we started to build, well, you might have heard Ken Burns say that we started river cruising in 1993. Do you remember that? Well, what happened was, we did. We started in 1993, but we used the existing infrastructure, meaning European vessels. We only let it go for 1 season because our comment cards came back not very happy. Why? Because the cabins were small, they smelled like smoke, they weren't Tauck vessels. So we decided to build our own about less than a decade ago. We built 8 vessels, and we took a look at everything that was out there. We said, we don't want to have too many people on board. We want to give them good service. We want them to have a good sense of space. We want them to feel relaxed on board instead of hurried and crowded. So we have 2 sizes of vessel. We have 4 vessels that are max 110 meters, where other companies have up to 150 guests on board. We have no more than 98. And that allows us to have more suites and larger cabins. So the top deck are our suites. There are 14 300 square foot suites, and then the middle deck, there are 225 square feet. The bottom deck, we have no single supplement ever in our category 1. So if you or a friend likes to travel, and goes without a companion, don't worry. We're happy to, or your husband snores and you can't stand sleeping with him, have him get his own room right there. Then we have the longer vessels. So these are 135 meters, where there's a company out there, I won't tell you the name of it, it rhymes with hiking. They have 190 people, same size vessel, where we have no more than 130. So on all of those vessels, the other cruise lines, they have a cruise director. We have 4 people from Tauck on each one of our vessels. So when you go ashore, you go in small groups. Usually about 15 guests per local guide, and then you're going to have a Tauck person too. And we design our own excursions. On the bottom deck, on the longer vessels, we also have what's called our loft cabin. So this is a good sense of space. Did you see? You did that? Oh, cool.
Oh my gosh, it's
Yeah.
fabulous.
So the big drawback to staying on the bottom deck usually is that there's a window and you don't get a lot of light. But this is actually a raised platform where if you sit there, your feet are at the water level, and you have this window that goes all the way up into the top of the next deck. So you have a lot of light coming in.
And it retracts.
Yeah, you can press a button and the window opens, so you can have the breeze coming in. It's 225 square feet. And then our suites, we have either 14 on our smaller vessels or 22 on our longer vessels, 300 square feet. We have a separate sofa that folds out into a bed. So if you take kids, we have 4 distinct family itineraries. So if you want to take kids or grandkids, which Eric and Angela and the girls did last year, they did one in France. Decent sized bathrooms, well lit, and the 4 Tauck directors. And once you go, you land at the airport, you don't need to use a wallet. Really, honestly. You don't have to think about tipping the local guide, you don't have to buy a beverage. It's premium beverages any time of the day or night, all the gratuities, everything's included. The vessels, like I said, not crowded. Now, with 190 people with the other company, as opposed to 130, that's 60 more people in the same space. So for us, it's nice and easy. And an open seating policy in the restaurant. So I've been on a river cruise with another company, and at 7 o'clock the first night, everybody was lined up, waiting for the doors to open for the restaurant. I'm like, what are they doing? And it happened again. And I realized they were dying for their table for 4, their table for 6. Because they only had so many. With us, we have open seating. In fact, on the trip that I was on with Angela and Eric, there were 9 of us having a good time up in the lounge. It was like 8 o'clock. I went down to the maitre d'. I said, could you do a table for 9? He said, give me 10 minutes. 10 minutes later, table for 9 right there. So you can enjoy the town. You can do whatever you'd like to. You're not crowded and you're not hurried. It's up to you. And then on the back we have a bistro. It's a more casual restaurant. It's open for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. There's a chef there from 11 to 11, and then there's continental breakfast in the morning. But our true focus is on what we do when you get off of the vessel. Again, we're a tour operator. We always focus on how you see the destination, and that's what we do here. Berg Statsby, Chateau Bizet, Lefkowitz Palace, Schloss Johannesburg. We go to these places after hours. They're not open to the public. We bring in caterers, we bring in performers, we have an exclusive evening inside, and it's just us. It's something that you couldn't actually purchase on your own. We do a lot of that. Our Amsterdam to Bern, we go up to the top of Europe to Jungfrau, because we feel that that's necessary, that you should be doing that, and we're happy to do that. If you come with us on the Seine, we're going to take you to Giverny, to Monet's Gardens. We'll get there before it opens, so you're getting pictures of the gardens instead of all the people in the gardens. If you're interested in Oberammergau, happens only once a decade. It's coming up in 2020. We're about half sold. We don't even have pricing out yet, but we have 3 river cruise itineraries and 2 land itineraries. And if you want more information, I can certainly get that. And the last thing I wanted to mention are our family programs, and I'm a big advocate of those. Angela and Eric have been on 2 of those. Has anybody here done one? You did? How old were the kids?
Teenager.
Did they have fun?
Wonderful. We're going to Africa for our 5th.
Oh, I'm envious. How old are how old?
He'll be graduating high school.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah. So I don't have kids, but I have nephews, and I took my nephews on. Well, I took my nephew when he was graduating high school on our Canadian Rockies itinerary, on our family program. I decided on the family program because it was much more active than our adult program. You know, I was thinking before I decided to do a trip, I thought, well, I can get him something, you know, for college or something. What can I get him? And then he's up in Massachusetts. I called him up. I said, Dan, would you do a trip with me? Sure, Aunt Jennifer. So I booked this, and we had the best time. We connected, and that was the best part about it. You know, he's a kid that I would see at Thanksgiving, at Christmas. You know, I don't spend a lot of time with him because I live in Florida, he lives in Massachusetts. So it was really fun. Day 2, he told me it was the best, most beautiful place he'd ever been. He was ordering venison, bison, all kinds of stuff off the menu that nobody's ever served him in Marlborough, Massachusetts. And we did all kinds of things. In Jasper, we got the fun card, so we got to play mini golf. We got the go paddle boarding. We went out on the kayaks, all kinds of stuff, and we went whitewater rafting. This here was probably his biggest fun day, I think. Why? Because my mom came too, and he never, ever anticipated that his 7-year-old grandmother would go whitewater rafting with him. She became a cool grandparent all of a sudden. So here's Daniel. Here's my mom. Can you tell how much fun she's having?
Hanging on for dear life.
And then this year, I got to do a river cruise on the Rhone with Eric, Angela, the girls, and my nephews too. So I had been to this aqueduct, I don't know how many times, probably 50, because I've been a tour director in France. Never did I get into where the water carried on the top, but we had special access, so that's my nephew Alex. And then they did a private bullfight for us in Provence. They didn't kill anything, it was really just a show. We made art out of chocolate. Do you remember that? Making the art? Do you remember Ryan? And day 2, we had a choice of either a bike ride around Paris or to take the city tour motor coach. And then we all met at the Eiffel Tower. We didn't have to wait in line. We went up to the Eiffel Tower, had lunch. It was his 13th birthday that day. I had to tell him over dessert though, over birthday cake. I'm sorry, Andrew, it's probably all downhill from here. We got to play petanque with the locals. This town probably wasn't as interesting to the kids as it was to us. It was beautiful. It was a nice little walking town. But the tour directors made it very engaging. They told the kids.
It actually was their favorite stop on the whole cruise.
It was? one of the reasons why it might have been interesting is because the tour director said there's a lot of cats in this town.
Oh.
Who can come back with the most photos of cats? So the kids were like, taking pictures like crazy. And the kids got a piece of paper with a croissant on it for everything that they participated in. One day we had a buffet with, they had to taste frog legs and pâtés and all kinds of stuff to get their croissant. One day they went kite flying with the captain and the tour directors, they'd get their croissant. So every day. And then at the end of the trip, they could trade it in for a baseball cap, a soccer ball, all kinds of fun stuff. So it was really engaging, really fun, and yeah. And I took this picture on day 4. So these kids didn't know each other 3 days before that. When the kid right here, Andrew, the birthday boy, said goodbye to me, he hugged me and thanked me 4 times. Yeah. So, if I can do that every year till they won't go without Jen anymore, that window's so short, right? When those kids are young, I'm going to do it because you don't get that time back. So I truly appreciate your kind attention. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer that. You probably know that Tauck, for those of you that are that familiar with us, we never discount. We never discount. The price of the brochure is always the price. But as a thank you for coming, we'll offer you a complimentary night. So you can go in a day early or stay a day longer. It always comes with a transfer and breakfast. So, thank you.